The stars had learned to fear the. For 300 years, their living warships had moved through the galaxy like a plague. They did not build their vessels. They grew them. Each ship was a creature of flesh and bone and hunger, with hulls that could heal from any wound and weapons that changed and adapted to fight any enemy. 17 different species had tried to stop them. 17 species had failed. Some were destroyed completely. Others became slaves. A few managed to hide in the dark corners of space, hoping they would forget about them. They never forgot. Admiral stood on the bridge of her flagship, the pride of, and watched the tactical display with tired eyes. She was old now, even by the standards of her long-lived species. She had spent 60 years fighting 60 years of watching friends die, 60 years of losing. The display showed what remained of the combined fleets of the Republic and the Confederacy. The answer was simple: nothing remained. 6 hours ago, 40,000 warships had gathered to make a final stand against the Armada. Now there was only debris and silence. They had not lost a single ship. "Admiral," her aide said quietly, "the enemy is moving toward Nexus Prime." Closed her eyes. Nexus Prime, the capital world of the Galactic Coalition. 12 billion people lived there, 12 billion souls who were counting on her to protect them. She had nothing left to protect them with. The Coalition fleet had been reduced to less than 1,000 ships. Most of them were damaged. Many had crews that were exhausted and afraid. They had watched the greatest military force in galactic history get destroyed in a single afternoon. "Send out distress calls to every member species," ordered. "Tell them we need everything they have, every ship, every soldier, every weapon." Her aide hesitated. "Admiral, I have already done this. The responses are coming in now." "And?" "No one is coming. They are fortifying their remaining colonies. They have retreated beyond the rim. They claim they need their ships for home defense." The aide paused. "Everyone is preparing for the end, Admiral. They believe the Coalition has already lost." Could not blame them. She believed it too. She turned to look out the viewport at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Armada was coming. 200 bioships, each one capable of destroying a planet. Their leader, had consumed the knowledge of 1,000 conquered worlds. It knew every tactic, every weapon, every trick that any species had ever used against it. And it had beaten them all. "There is one response that is different," her aide said suddenly. "Turned, what do you mean?" "A species from the far edge of the galaxy. They call themselves Terrans. They come from a small planet called Earth." The aide looked confused. "They say they are sending help." For the first time in hours, felt something other than despair. "How many ships? What kind of fleet?" The aide checked the message again. His confusion grew deeper. "One ship, Admiral. They are sending one ship." The bridge fell silent. Officers turned to look at each other. Someone laughed, but it was not a happy sound. "One ship." The Coalition had just lost 40,000 vessels, and these Terrans were sending one ship. "Is this a joke?" asked. "I do not believe so, Admiral. The message seems sincere. They say their ship is called the Unconquered, and it will arrive within 12 hours. Shook her head slowly. She had heard of the Terrans, but only in passing. They were a young species, barely a century old in terms of space travel. They had no great empire, no advanced technology, no reputation for military power. They were considered primitive by most galactic standards. And they were sending one ship to fight 200 bio-vessels. "Respond to them," said finally. "Tell them we appreciate their offer, but they should stay home. There is no point in them dying alongside us." The aide nodded and began to compose the message. But before he could send it, another communication arrived. "Admiral, the Terrans have responded before we could reply. They say—" The aide paused, reading the message twice to make sure he understood it correctly. "They say they are not coming to die. They are coming to win." Stared at the message for a long moment. Then she laughed. It was a bitter sound, full of exhaustion and hopelessness. "Let them come, then," she said. "Perhaps they know something we do not, or perhaps they are simply too young and foolish to understand what they are facing." She turned back to the viewport. In the distance, she could see the first flickers of light that marked the approaching armada. They were still hours away, but they were coming. They were always coming. They did not negotiate. They did not show mercy. They did not stop. For 300 years, no one had been able to stand against them. The greatest empires in the galaxy had crumbled before their advance. The most brilliant military minds had failed to find a weakness in their adaptive biology. And now, in the final hours before the end, a single ship from a species nobody had heard of was coming to save them. Did not believe in miracles. She had seen too much death, too much failure, too much loss to believe that anything could change the outcome of this war. But as she watched the stars and waited for the enemy to arrive, she found herself thinking about the Terrans and their strange message. They were not coming to die, they were coming to win. It was foolish. It was impossible. It was the kind of thing that only a very young species would believe. But somewhere deep inside her tired old heart felt something she had not felt in years. She felt hope. It was small and fragile and probably pointless, but it was there. One ship was coming. One ship crewed by a species that did not know they were supposed to lose. And in a galaxy that had forgotten how to fight, perhaps that was exactly what was needed. They had never been defeated. But then again, they had never faced the Terrans. The Terran ship came out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Nexus system, and every sensor officer in the Coalition fleet stopped what they were doing to stare. It was ugly. That was the first thing Admiral noticed. The ships were organic and flowing, like creatures born from nightmares. Coalition vessels were elegant and smooth, designed with careful attention to beauty. But the Terran dreadnought looked like it had been built by people who did not care about beauty at all. It was called the THS Unconquered, and it was a brutal thing. Sharp angles and heavy armor, gun turrets that stuck out like fists, a hull that was covered in scars and burns and patches where old damage had been repaired. Along its sides, someone had painted words in white letters, names of places, names of battles, hundreds of them covering the ship like tattoos. "What are those markings?" asked her aide. The aide checked his records. "They appear to be the names of previous engagements, Admiral, battles the ship has fought in." Counted the names. There were more than she could easily track. "How old is this vessel?" "According to our records, the Unconquered is 47 years old. It has been in continuous service since its construction." 47 years. In Coalition terms, that was nothing. Its own flagship was over 200 years old, but looking at the Terran ship, with its hull and countless battle markers, she got the sense that those 47 years had been very busy indeed. A communication came through from the Terran vessel. A face appeared on the screen. It was a human woman with dark hair cut short and skin the color of copper. Her eyes were calm and steady, and she held a cup of some dark liquid in her hand. "This is Captain of the THS Unconquered," the woman said. "We are here to assist with your problem." Did not know whether to laugh or cry. "Captain, we appreciate your willingness to help, but I do not think you understand the situation. The Armada consists of 200 bioships. We have less than 1,000 vessels remaining, most of them damaged. The enemy will be here in less than 8 hours. "I am aware of the numbers," Captain said. She took a sip from her cup. "We have been studying them for some time. Interesting species. Their ships adapt to every weapon used against them. Within minutes of encountering a new attack, their hulls develop resistance to it. Very impressive biology." "Then you understand why this fight cannot be won." "I understand why you believe it cannot be won. There is a difference." Felt frustration rising in her chest. "Captain, 17 species have tried to defeat the All of them had larger fleets, better technology, and more experience than your people. All of them failed. Yes, agreed. They did fail. Do you know why? Because they adapt to everything. No leaned forward and something changed in her eyes. The calm was still there, but beneath it saw something else, something harder. They failed because they tried not to lose. They fought defensive battles. They protected their ships. They minimized their casualties, and they ate them alive. She set down her cup. Humans do not fight that way, Admiral. We do not try not to lose. We try to win. There is a very important difference. Shook her head. With respect, Captain, those are just words. They do not care about attitude or determination. They care about biology and physics. Their ships heal. Their weapons evolve. Your determination will not change that. You are probably right, said, but I am not here to change their biology. I am here to break their spirit. Before could respond, the Terran captain continued. They have never been hurt. Not really. Oh, they have lost individual ships here and there, but they have never faced an enemy that made them afraid, an enemy that made them bleed and kept coming, an enemy that would rather die than surrender. She smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. Admiral, my species is very young. We have only been in space for about a century, but before that we spent thousands of years fighting each other, war after war after war. We are very, very good at it. Not because we are stronger or smarter than other species. We are actually quite fragile. We break easily. We die easily. We do not live very long even under the best conditions. She stood up from her chair. But we do not stop, ever. That is the one thing we are better at than anyone else in the galaxy. We get knocked down and we get back up. We lose a battle and we start planning the next one. We watch our friends die, and we use our grief as fuel to keep fighting. Found herself unable to look away from the human woman's eyes. They have conquered 17 species because those species wanted to live, said. They were afraid to die. They held back. They tried to survive. But my crew is not afraid to die, Admiral. We made peace with death a long time ago. Every human does. It is part of growing up for us. She gestured at the hull, visible through the viewport behind her. You see those names painted on my ship? Those are battles where humans died. Thousands of them. Millions over our history. And we paint their names on our hulls so that we never forget them. So that every enemy we face knows that they are not just fighting a ship. They are fighting every human who ever lived and died and refused to give up. Was silent for a long moment. What do you want from us? She finally asked. I want you to follow my lead, said. When the battle starts, stay behind me. Watch what we do. And when you see the start to hesitate, start to doubt, start to fear, that is when you attack, not before. And if you fail? Captain picked up her cup again and took another sip. Then you will be no worse off than you are now. But we will not fail, Admiral. We did not come here to fail. She smiled again, and this time there was something almost warm in it. We came here to teach them something they have never learned. We came here to show them what it feels like to face an enemy that cannot be broken, cannot be scared, cannot be stopped. She raised her cup in a small salute. We came here to win. The Armada entered the Nexus system at 3:47 in the morning, standard time. 200 bioships moved through space like a swarm of hungry predators. Their organic hulls pulsed with strange lights. Their weapon growths twisted and changed as they prepared for combat. At the center of the formation flew the largest vessel of all, the flagship of the itself. There was not a single creature. It was a vast intelligence spread across all ships, connected by invisible threads of thought. It had lived for thousands of years. It had consumed the knowledge of countless species. It had never known defeat. As it approached the coalition fleet, it felt something like amusement. The defenders were gathered in a standard formation around the planet Nexus Prime. Less than 1,000 ships, most of them damaged. They calculated that the battle would take less than 4 hours. Then its sensors detected something unusual. A single ship was breaking away from the coalition formation. It was accelerating toward the armada at a speed that seemed almost suicidal. They analyzed the vessel. Terran design, primitive technology, one ship against 200. They decided to ignore it. Such a small threat was not worth attention. That was its first mistake. On the bridge of the Unconquered, Captain stood with her feet planted and her eyes fixed on the approaching enemy. Around her, her crew worked with quiet efficiency. They had done this before. They knew what was coming. "Range to enemy fleet," she asked. 200,000 kilometers and closing, Commander reported. He was her second in command, a tall man with dark skin and calm eyes. "They are launching organic missiles. First wave incoming. Point defense free fire." The Unconquered's guns came alive. Streams of tungsten slugs poured into space, shredding the incoming missiles before they could get close. The missiles tried to adapt, changing their approach patterns, growing thicker armor. But the Unconquered's targeting systems adjusted faster, finding weak points, exploiting gaps. "They are adapting to our kinetic weapons," said. "Hull resistance increasing. Switch to plasma lances, 3-second bursts." Blue-white beams of superheated matter stabbed out from the Unconquered's weapon banks. Ships screamed as their flesh burned. But even as they screamed, their hulls were changing, developing reflective surfaces to scatter the plasma. Switch to kinetics. The hulls had just finished adapting to plasma. They were not ready for tungsten again. Slugs tore through ships that had softened their armor to deal with heat. Switch to microwave arrays. The pattern continued. Kinetics, plasma, microwaves, nuclear torpedoes, chemical explosives, gamma radiation. The Unconquered never used the same weapon for more than a few seconds. Every time they started to adapt, the attack changed. They felt something it had not felt in centuries: confusion. This was not how enemies fought. Other species picked their best weapons and used them consistently. They developed strategies and stuck to them. They behaved in predictable ways that they could analyze and counter. But these Terrans fought like chaos given form. There was no pattern, no strategy it could identify, just constant, relentless change. And then things got worse. The Unconquered reached the formation and did not slow down. It did not try to maintain distance like every other enemy they had faced. Instead, it dove straight into the heart of the swarm, guns blazing in all directions. And then it rammed the flagship. The impact shook both vessels. The Unconquered's reinforced prow tore through the bioship's hull like a knife through flesh. Before the ship could seal the wound, before it could adapt and heal, something came pouring through the breach. Humans. Terran Marines in powered armor, carrying weapons that belonged to a more primitive age. Flamethrowers that spat liquid fire. Shotguns loaded with explosive shells. Blades made of metal that could cut through bone. The warriors inside the flagship tried to stop them. They were larger than humans, stronger, faster. Their bodies could adapt and change in seconds. But the humans did not care. They fought like demons. When one fell, another stepped over the body and kept moving forward. They used their flamethrowers to burn through organic walls. They threw grenades into clusters of defenders. They screamed battle cries in a language they did not understand. Admiral watched from her flagship, unable to believe what she was seeing. "They are boarding the command ship," she whispered. "That is impossible. No one has ever successfully boarded a vessel." Her aide was equally shocked. "Their casualties are severe. They have lost nearly a third of their boarding force already." But they are not stopping. No, they are not stopping. On the tactical display, could see the Terran Marines pushing deeper into the flagship. They were taking losses that would have broken any coalition force, but they kept advancing. Every meter they gained was paid for in blood, and they paid the price without hesitation. The tried to focus its attention on destroying the unconquered from outside. But the Terran ship had positioned itself in a way that made it hard to attack without also hitting the flagship. And inside, the humans were getting closer to the central cortex, getting closer to the itself. For the first time in 300 years, the felt fear. It sent commands to its fleet: destroy the Terran ship, kill the boarders, stop them at any cost. But the Terrans did not stop. They could not be frightened. They could not be intimidated. They knew they were dying and they did not care. On the bridge of the Unconquered, Captain received reports from her boarding teams. The news was bad. Casualties were mounting. Ammunition was running low. They were adapting to their weapons. Pull them back, asked. Shook her head. No, tell them to push harder. Tell them we are almost there. She looked out at the chaos of the battle, at the dying ships and the burning wreckage. Tell them they are starting to be afraid. And she smiled. The inside of the flagship was like being inside a living creature. The walls were made of flesh. The floors were covered in a thick membrane that pulsed with each step. Strange fluids dripped from the ceiling, and the air smelled of blood and something older, something alien. Captain moved through this nightmare with her rifle raised and her eyes sharp. She had left the bridge of the Unconquered to lead the final assault herself. Some of her officers had told her it was too dangerous. She had ignored them. Around her, what remained of her boarding force pushed forward. They had started with 300 Marines. Now they were down to less than 100. The corridors behind them were littered with bodies, both human and. But they were close now. She could feel it. The watched them come through 1,000 eyes. It had tried everything to stop them. It had sent its best warriors. It had changed the shape of the corridors to confuse them. It had filled rooms with poison gas and flooded passages with acid. Nothing worked. The humans adapted. When the gas came, they sealed their helmets. When the acid flooded in, they found another route. When warriors blocked their path, they killed them and moved on. They were like water, flowing around every obstacle, finding every crack. The reached out with its mind and touched the thoughts of the human leader. It wanted to understand. It needed to understand. Why do you fight? It asked her directly. You cannot win. Even if you destroy this vessel, I am distributed across my entire fleet. My consciousness will survive. You will have achieved nothing. Stopped walking. She looked up at the ceiling as if she could see the watching her. Is that what you think? She said. That this is about destroying you? What else could it be? You attack, I defend. This is the nature of war. Laughed. It was a strange sound in that alien place, warm and human and completely out of place. You really do not understand us at all, do you? She started walking again, her surviving Marines following close behind. We are not here to destroy you, she said. We are here to teach you something, something you have never learned in 300 years of conquest. And what is that? That you can bleed. The process, this statement, it did not understand. I have always known that I can be damaged, it said. Individual ships can be destroyed. Individual warriors can be killed. This is not new information. No, agreed. But being damaged and being hurt are different things. You have lost ships before, but you have never lost anything that mattered. You have never faced an enemy that made you doubt. That made you wonder if maybe, just maybe, you might not win. She rounded a corner and found herself in a vast chamber. The walls here were covered in something that looked like brain tissue. Thick cables of nerve fiber ran in all directions. At the center of the room was a massive organic structure, pulsing with light. The central cortex, the heart of this consciousness on this ship. You see, said, raising her rifle, every species you have conquered was afraid of you. They fought to survive. They held back their best ships because they were scared to lose them. They retreated when things got bad because they wanted to live. She took a step closer to the cortex. But we are not afraid of you. We are not even afraid to die. We made peace with death a long time ago. It is part of being human. We know from the moment we are born that our time is limited, that every day is borrowed, that eventually everything ends. The felt that cold sensation again, that strange feeling it had never experienced before. That is why we fight differently than other species, continued. We do not fight to survive. We fight to make our deaths mean something. We fight so that the people who come after us will have a better chance. We fight because giving up is worse than dying. She was standing directly in front of the cortex now. Her Marines had spread out around the chamber, weapons pointed at the warriors who had gathered to make a final stand. You have spent 300 years believing that you cannot be stopped, said, that nothing in this galaxy can stand against you. But now look at yourself. Look at what one ship full of angry humans has done to your certainty. She pulled a blade from her belt. It was a simple thing, made of metal and polymer, designed to cut through organic matter. You are feeling something right now, something new, something you have never felt before. She drove the blade into the cortex. It is called fear. The screamed. The sound was not physical. It was a psychic wave that rippled across the fleet, touching every ship, every warrior, every part of the vast distributed consciousness. The was afraid. For the first time in 3 centuries, the knew what it felt like to face an enemy they were not sure they could defeat. Admiral saw it happen on her tactical display. The fleet, which had been pressing forward with relentless confidence, suddenly hesitated. Ships stopped advancing. Formations broke apart. The coordinated assault became confused and uncertain. "What is happening?" her aide asked. Stared at the display. She had fought them for 60 years. She knew their tactics, their patterns, their absolute certainty. She had never seen them hesitate before. "The Terrans," she said slowly, "they actually did it." "Did what?" "They made the afraid." She turned to her communications officer. "All ships," she ordered. "Attack, attack now while they are confused. Hit them with everything we have." The coalition fleet surged forward. For the first time in the war, they were the aggressors. They poured fire into the disorganized formation. Ships that had seemed invincible just hours ago were suddenly vulnerable, their coordination broken, their confidence shattered. On the flagship, Captain pulled her blade free from the damaged cortex. It was not dead. It was too distributed, too spread out across its fleet to be killed so easily. But it was wounded. It was scared. And it was starting to understand something it had never understood before. These humans could not be conquered. Not because they were stronger, not because they had better technology, but because they simply refused to stop. And that was something they had no adaptation for. The battle lasted another 6 hours after the assault on the flagship. When it was over, 93 bioships had been destroyed. 62 more had fled into faster-than-light travel, running away from a battle for the first time in 300 years. The remaining vessels had stopped fighting and were broadcasting signals of surrender. The survivors of the fleet begged for mercy. Admiral could barely believe what she was seeing. She had spent her entire adult life fighting an enemy that never retreated, never surrendered, never showed any sign of weakness. Now that same enemy was asking her to spare them. "Accept their surrender," she ordered. "All ships cease fire." The guns fell silent. The wreckage of the battle drifted through space, a mix of organic matter and metal and bodies. So many bodies. Turned her attention to the Terran ship. The Unconquered was still embedded in the side of the flagship, both vessels drifting together like 2 wounded animals that had collapsed into each other. "Can you reach Captain?" she asked her communications officer. "I am trying, Admiral. Their systems are badly damaged." A few minutes later, a crackling voice came through the speakers. She sounded exhausted. "Admiral, I see you took my advice about attacking while they were confused." "I did, it worked." Paused. "Captain, what is your status?" There was a long silence before answered. The Unconquered is not going anywhere on its own power. We have hull breaches in 17 sections. Life support is failing in most of the ship. Another pause. We lost 47% of our crew, 312 people. Closed her eyes. 312 humans had died on that ship. More had died in the boarding action, all to wound an enemy that had seemed unstoppable. "We are sending rescue ships," she said. "Hold on, we will get your people out." "Thank you, Admiral." The connection went quiet but did not close. After a moment, spoke again. "Captain, I need to understand something." "Ask." "Your people died today, hundreds of them. You took losses that would have broken any coalition force, and yet your crew never stopped fighting, never retreated, never even hesitated, struggled to find the right words. How do you make people willing to sacrifice themselves like that?" Was quiet for a long time. When she finally answered, her voice was softer than before. "We do not make them willing, Admiral. They already are. That is what it means to be human." "I do not understand." "We are a very young species, very fragile. We die easily and we do not live very long. A human who reaches 100 years old is considered ancient." Laughed quietly. "By your standards, every member of my crew is barely more than a child." "But that would make you afraid of death, not accepting of it." "You would think so, but it works the other way around. Because we know how short our lives are, we learn to value them differently. We do not try to avoid death. We try to make our lives matter. We try to leave something behind that is worth remembering." Thought about the names painted on the hull of the Unconquered. All those battles, all those dead. "The names on your ship," she said. "They are not just records, are they?" "No, they are promises. Every name on that hull is a promise that we will remember them, that their sacrifice meant something, that the next generation will carry their memory forward." His voice grew stronger. "And when new crew members join the ship, they see those names. They understand that they are part of something bigger than themselves, something that will continue after they are gone. That is why you paint them where everyone can see." "Yes, so that our enemies know they are not just fighting one crew. They are fighting everyone who ever served on that ship, everyone who ever died for what we believe in. 300 years of conquests ended today, Admiral, not because of technology or tactics, because of those names." Nodded slowly, even though could not see her. "Captain, I believe the coalition owes your people a great debt. We did not come here for payment." "I know, but I would like to discuss the future. When this is over, when your wounded have been treated and your dead have been honored, I would like to talk about an alliance, a formal partnership between the coalition and the Terran government." There was a sound that might have been laughing. "Admiral, we are a single ship from a species that most of the galaxy has never heard of. What could we possibly offer the coalition?" "You could offer what you showed us today. The thing that no other species has been able to provide in 300 years of war." "And what is that?" Looked out at the battlefield, at the surrendering fleet, at the impossible victory they had just achieved. "Hope," she said. "You could offer us hope." 6 months later, the formal alliance was signed. The Terran Confederation joined the Galactic Coalition as full members. It was a small partnership at first, just a few ships and a few thousand soldiers. But word spread. Stories of the Battle of Nexus Prime traveled across the galaxy. Species that had spent centuries hiding from the began to emerge. Civilizations that had given up hope started to believe again. And whenever a new threat arose, whenever some enemy believed itself too powerful to defeat, the call went out across the stars. "Send for the Terrans." Because the galaxy had learned something that day, something important. There was a species out there that did not know how to give up. A species that painted the names of their dead on their ships and used grief as fuel for battle. A species that was too stubborn to admit when they were beaten. They had conquered 17 species in 300 years. They could not conquer humanity. Not because humans were stronger, not because they had better weapons or smarter tactics, but because humans simply refused to stop. And in the end, that made all the difference.